The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start with the crazy. Let's jump right in with the crazy Warren Davidson, congressman from Ohio, the southwestern side of the state. Down just above Columbus, John Boehner's old district, evidently today compared the COVID vaccine mandates to the Holocaust. He tweeted out, let's recall that the Nazis dehumanized Jewish people before segregating them, segregated them before imprisoning them, imprisoned them before enslaving them, and enslaved them before massacring them. A lot of Democrats not thrilled with that. A lot of folks not thrilled in Congress, and rightfully so. You've got a guy who clearly looking to get his name out there. I honestly had never heard of Warren Davidson before. No legislation to speak of, no policy chops, nothing of interest really. But he got his name in the paper. Look at this. Good for him. And this is kind of where you go, this is where the Republican Party has lost their mind. I looked up the guy's record, really nothing. He's a nothing congressman with no record, really. And you go, this is the current party. Which is why today, for some reason, today was the day a lot of people slammed my email box with, have you seen this? And evidently, our military is going to engage in a couple of week-long training exercise. It is called Robin Sage. I don't know what Robin Sage means, but this is the name of the exercise. Going to be going on, I guess, from the 22nd of January through February the 3rd. Going to take over probably a good portion of North Carolina. And the goal, I guess, in this is that they're going to practice on how to deal with illegitimate governments. They're going to deal with trying to overthrow an illegitimate government. Or as they put it, Robin Sage is the U.S. military's premier unconventional warfare exercise and the final test of a year's worth of training for aspiring Special Forces soldiers. Candidates are placed in an environment of political instability characterized by armed conflict, forcing soldiers to analyze and solve problems to meet the challenges of this real-world training. Now, they're asking for people in North Carolina to become volunteers, to be like play actors, to help the soldiers, are you a good one or are you a bad one? And it kind of makes you go, hold on. Does this seem like somebody's preparing for, I don't know what could happen in, let's say 2024? Is this something that our military is going, maybe we should start worrying about the crazy people with guns who are basically all over the country and have this rabid idea of, the former guy the defeated former guy got cheated. And you hear it in the social media that they're willing to take up arms for him. Is this the military going, we should probably prepare? Maybe we don't want to get caught with our boots off. Maybe just a thought. And you go, but Rick, it's not that bad. Oh, yes, it is. Arizona this weekend, I guess there's going to be a big rally. The defeated former guy has got a big rally scheduled, and one of the special speakers who's going to be there, one of the special guests, is an Arizona state representative, a guy named Mark Fincham. And Fincham, going to address the faithful. He's a QAnon guy. Yeah, he's one of those who repeatedly shared the Q kookery, social media. He's done Q kook podcasts. He's been all over the platforms. He was one of the headliners at the Las Vegas Kookathon. all of that stuff. He's been on stage with the pillow guy, all kinds of stuff. He's in Arizona. He's kind of the Q King kook. He's going to be there as well. And I understand, and this is where it gets fun for me. Evidently, they're pimping the idea that there's going to be live entertainment. And I can't actually believe someone reported this, but Michael Jackson, Prince, Whitney Houston, Janis Joplin, Tupac, and John Lennon. And I'm going, Tupac, really? Okay, maybe they just threw that out there and let's get Tupac back because he's gonna be right in line with the white supremacist movement. Yeah, but this is the kind of thing that's insane to me because they're going, well, JFK Jr. is coming back, and I wonder if there's still somebody wandering around Dealey Plaza waiting for JFK Jr. to come back, because if you remember, they were there, hundreds of them. And that's what scares me. And this is why you can't really have decent things, why we can't have nice things in this country, because so many weirdos. I mean, you go, geez, oh man, where do you get this? And you go, this is why our economy is so badly screwed up. This is why we can't have nice things. This is why we can't address real problems, because we got to worry about what the kooks are doing. The well-armed, crazy lunatics who believe JFK Jr. is coming back to be Donald Trump's vice president. And you go, do you understand anything about politics? Do you not understand that JFK Jr. would not, under any circumstances, be in the same political, ideological realm as a Donald Trump? Do you get that? And the answer is no. The answer is no. It just sounds like a great conspiracy. Boy, we can make this up. And again, this is why we can't get anything done, because we're so busy worried about the crazy people. And here's the thing that gets me. And this is the other scary part of this. My home, the place where I grew up, Cleveland, Ohio. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, the big newspaper there, ran an editorial begging the current Republican governor, who is not a great leader, but he's not a crazy Republican. He's not crazy. He's just a Republican. He announced he was going to retire. He's not going to run for re-election. And the Cleveland Plain Dealer is begging him to run for election. Please run for re-election. And this is what they wrote. Otherwise, if he doesn't run for re-election, otherwise, the ugliness that is the Republican primary for your seat will continue its cavalcade of intemperate, cruel, ill-judged, narrow-minded, and explosive rhetoric designed to divide, not unite. Otherwise, the majority of candidates from your party will continue to spew their lies about the 2020 election, lies that just bust apart hopes to rebuild any consensus in America, but also that continue to shred the very heart and soul of the traditional conservative Republican Party values you have served so ably over your long career of public service. I'm going to doubt that part, but they're going, please, you've been bad, and a lot of people in Ohio are not happy with you, but you're better than what's coming. And I look at what's happening in Pennsylvania. You've got a Senate race coming up here and a governor's race where you've got crazy people coming from all over the country moving in. You got a TV guy. You got Dr. Oz moving from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. You got a millionaire coming from Connecticut going to move in. And we're going to have billionaire bingo to decide who are our elected leaders. And all along, things are not going to get better for working people. And I keep coming back to this. The reason we can't have nice things is because we've got crazy people running the asylum. And at some point, we've got to put down the insanity. At some point, the rest of us have got to decide, no, we can't deal with you right now. We've got fires to put out. We've got lives to make better. And this is why elections matter. And this is why I come back to, Joe Biden gave that speech in Georgia about making sure that everyone has the right to vote. Republicans are doing everything they can do to rig the rules. And they have been doing it for decades. While saying, Democrats are cheating. It always amazed me. It's one of those things I learned in school. The one who's pointing his finger and screaming the loudest, going, he did it, is generally the one who did it. Or as my mother always said, if you point one finger at somebody else, you got three back at you. That's them. And you go, but Rick, how did they cheat? You go back to 2000, a real stolen election. When you look at the fact that Catherine Harris, the Secretary of State, certified that election before the votes were even counted. And how before the election even happened, they had purged 90,000 people off the voting rolls who just happened to have names that, sounded like, certain people of color who generally vote for Democrats. But that wasn't cheating. It was just playing the game. And they had a Secretary of State who was willing to go along, which is why there's so much money going into races where you elect your Secretaries of State. The guy in Georgia is raising, that Rafton Parger, raising tons of money. But the kook running against him, raising tons more. Because the thing that Trump got, you got to have people who are willing to break the law on your side. Which is why I found it interesting, the Politico story, that it came out yesterday that Michigan had submitted a false certification of electors. What happens, and it happens where I live in Pennsylvania, it happens in every state. On a certain day, all of the electors go to the Capitol. They all cast their ballot for who they were elected to cast their ballot for, and then they certify it. It's all ceremonial because it's all mostly taken care of. And then they sign it off and they send it off to the National Archives, and then it's processed and it goes to Congress, and there's a whole process. But it's mostly ceremonial. In places like Michigan and in Wisconsin and in Arizona, evidently, and I kind of remember these stories from back then that they were trying it. I didn't know that they actually had done it. But I remember that they were holding their own separate events. But they actually submitted the documents as Trump had won Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And I think Rachel Maddow hit it on the head by saying, is this legal? I mean, is it legal that they do that? And who helped them to do this? How did they get along in that process? And then how many other states are willing to do this? And is this something that we now have to worry about? Because, look, as one woman was quoted by a newspaper in Arizona, the Arizona Republic, she said, we seated before the legislature here. We already turned it in. We beat them to the game. So basically, her philosophy was, if we hurried up and we certified before the actual certification happened and we turned it in, well, we beat you to it. Yours doesn't count. Nah. It's kind of like, if you ever saw the Eddie Izzard thing, we put a flag in the ground. Do you have a flag? And you go, but that's not how this works. What is wrong with you people? But this is the kind of stuff that these folks are willing to try and pass off. Now, unfortunately, the National Archives caught it. They sent a letter back to the Arizona Secretary of State, said, hey, these are forgeries. We're not accepting them. That kind of stuff. But you go, shouldn't someone go to jail over this? Isn't this one of those moments where you go, that's illegal? Someone should be held accountable. And all of this, from January 6th forward, there are a handful of people who are going to jail, but it's taking way too long. Way too many people are walking around scot-free going, well, it must have been legal. Nobody's coming for me. Especially the people at the top. Now, the interesting thing to me is, there are some Republicans now trying a little bit to push back. You saw Mike Rounds, Senator Rounds from South Dakota saying, they went through it. Trump lost. It was what it was. You have McConnell coming out saying, I think Senator Rounds told the truth about what happened in 2020 election. He agrees with him. So that's Mitch McConnell saying Biden won, which he has done before. So going to be interesting to see what happens with the party as we move forward on this issue. Because understand, in all of the races across the country where they elect secretaries of state, there is a crazy person who believes that 2020 was stolen. And a crazy person with lots of money. So the question then becomes, let's say they start electing them. Will we have to worry about forged documents? And this is why I keep going, Democrats. Let's start moving this stuff around. Move this hearing along. That's why today I'd love to find out what was said with ex-Trump White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, who did a virtual interview with the January 6th Commission. I would like to know what was there. Hopefully that will come soon. We also find the January 6th Committee is requested time with Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. I think that very important. I fully expect him to do the Jim Jordan and the Scott Perry. And again, I want to know why Scott Perry, my congressman, has not been subpoenaed. I want to know why they haven't forced him to come and sit. And look, you want to plead the fifth, that is your choice. But you should have to be in that seat. If it were you, if it were me, or any one of us, you know where we'd be sitting? In that seat. And he should, without question, be there as well. And this is where, it just keeps bringing me back to how much of this do we have to put up with? How much of this do we as the working class of this country, who gets up every day, works hard, plays by the rules, and gets screwed constantly? This is the uniting part of all this. All the sideshows, all the kookery, all the nonsense, all of this stuff is meant to distract and divide and pit us against each other so that we don't do what needs to be done, and that is chuck half these bums out. And then maybe we could have a functional representative democracy. We could have people on both sides of the aisle going, yeah, we shouldn't have kids who go to bed hungry every night. Yeah, we shouldn't have homeless veterans. Yeah, every American deserves the best health care that we can get them. Everyone deserves the best education they can get. And an education as far as their talents will take them without a lifetime full of debt. This is common sense stuff, but the reason we can't have any of this, we're still fighting over who can go to which bathroom. We're still fighting over if two people can love each other in the confines of their own four walls without Karen next door going crazy about it. I mean, we're really we're in bizarre moments. And until we start putting this noise aside, it's going to continue. They're going to continue to feed us this outrage candy. They're going to continue to feed us this kind of red meat that keeps us all, marching in Dealey Plaza looking for JFK Jr. 20 years after he's been dead. Wow. Crazy, crazy times. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Alex Press, labor reporter at Jacobin Magazine. We're going to be here to share some thoughts on what's going on out in Denver. Stick around. Right back after this.
Over 70 years of experience in heart and aviation, the members of the Association of Flight Attendants know the realities of the aircraft cabin better than anyone. We don't just serve drinks, we save lives. We don't just negotiate contracts, we move major policy issues like the smoking ban, no knives on planes, clean water, and safe food on board. The air we breathe matters, and we stop the spraying of poisonous pesticides. Training, rest, and no calls on planes matter as we fight fires, de-escalate conflict, revive, and breathe life. We safely usher passengers to the big business deal, the family vacation, the times of celebration, times of grief, and times of battle. We are aviation's first responders, and we are the last line of defense in aviation security. We are the first impression and the smile of aviation, connecting the people of our nations. Fly with us, partner with us, make progress with us. The Association of Flight Attendants. Stronger together, better together.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, quick shout out to the folks at the Art Institute of Chicago. Employees there have won their union. A majority of the workers, 142, voted yes, 44 no. And they are going to vote. They are going to begin to bargain on a contract, and good for them. As the one person said, not only that they got the union, they voted to form one bargaining unit for all the museum titles, because together they are stronger. And absolutely, I agree, and good on them. Also, some good news for the New York Times tech workers. They're going to get a unionization vote starting, I think, sometime this month. according to the NLRB regional director. That's going to happen, and good. I'm hoping the best for them, and that will help go forward. Some news now, evidently a strike in Denver. Thousands of Kroger workers there in the Denver area went on strike. As most things, better wages, hours, conditions, safety on the job, a big part of it. And evidently the last, best, and final offer by Kroger. Kind of a slap in the face from what I'm reading, and here to share some thoughts on what's going on in the Denver area at the King Soopers supermarket stores there in Colorado. I've asked Alex Press to come talk with us. Alex is a staff writer over at Jacobin Magazine. She does incredible work where she's written the most recent piece. A horrifying report shows the miserable working conditions at Kroger couldn't be better timed. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me as ever, Rick.
So, how bad? I mean, yeah, I listened to some of the stories of the workers who went on strike, and I guess there are several thousand of them that have gone out. How bad is it?
So it's really bad. So that report came out, with incredible timing, given that this strike has happened in Colorado starting today at 5 a.m. So that report was done surveying over 10,000 workers over the summer of 2021. And the numbers are crazy. So 14% of respondents either were homeless or had been homeless in the past year. And more than 3/4 of the workers are food insecure, right? So they either skip meals, they reduce the size of meals, they aren't sure if they can feed their families. And lots of them, 36%, worry about being evicted. They're not paying rent on time, they're not paying their mortgages. And when I spoke to the president of UFCW Local 7, which is the local that is now on strike, she immediately mentioned a worker who had worked at a Kroger-owned store for 12 years and was currently living in a shelter. So things are very bad. These jobs once paid a decent wage. They are union jobs, and a mixture of declining union power, maybe criticisms within the UFCW itself about how it fought on this. But also Kroger is just brutal intransigence around paying workers. It's decreased their wages for decades. Their real wages have gone down. And so what once were livable jobs now are part-time, very flexible and low-paid jobs.
Now remember, and I got to focus on this for a moment because we're still in the pandemic, so to speak. These were the frontline heroes. These were the patriots who helped keep us fed during the shutdown. These were the people who got up and went to work every day, and we were patting them on the back, and we were giving them nice names and platitudes. Not so much in the way of wages, but lots of nice words. And then you find out that a number of them are homeless. They can't feed their families. The jobs are unsafe. In fact, one of the facilities had a shooting not too long ago. It just seems that not so much on the hero front.
Yeah, definitely. And in speaking with workers and with that, the union's local president, Kim Cordova, today, they really emphasized that safety is in fact a big issue as far as these current contract negotiations going on in Colorado with King Soopers, that the company has no interest in laying out money for safety and concerns, not just about COVID, which obviously is a concern, right? As you mentioned, these are workers who interact with the public at a mass number, have been there day in and day out. And so they have had more COVID cases and more fatal COVID cases than the average worker. But actual physical safety in the sense of it was a King Soopers in Boulder that was the site of a mass shooting not that long ago. And actually the local president today told me about a store that had been getting called in threats about someone coming in to shoot up the store. And there was no communication with the other workers, right? So the workers answering those phone calls knew about these threats, but the company was not communicating with the other workers in the store. And so people didn't even know. It was evacuated a few times, but it was really up to the company to decide whether these were credible threats. So workers are very concerned.
Yeah, no, I got to tell you, if it's me, I'm not, if I'm in that situation, I'm probably not as worried about COVID as I am Karen. You got all these crazy people, and I see all these videos of these people losing their minds at cashiers and service workers, and I'm going, there's no way I would put up with that kind of abuse, and no worker should ever have to.
Yeah. And so, and the other big issue here, it's traditional economic issues. There's a wage differential as far as what the workers say they need and what the company is proposing in that last offer. So the company is proposing that a wage floor be $16 an hour, which, Denver's current minimum wage law is $15.87. So Kroger is generously offering 13 extra cents. Workers are disgusted by that. There's healthcare issues, but really something important to state here about this strike is the workers say this is an unfair labor practices strike, right? So they are saying that they're on strike because the company has been bargaining in bad faith. Specifically, the union local president today, Kim, told me that one of the big issues that they filed these charges around is that the company isn't providing necessary information, necessary data that they need to cost out their proposals, right? So the company won't say how many hours people are working, what the sales numbers are. And so the company, is preventing the union from actually being able to bargain. It's also, sort of not taking the bargaining seriously itself. It's not looking at the union's proposals. The guy who runs the division, who is the president of King Soopers, has spent 9 minutes at the bargaining table total over all these sessions. He came in, he said hello, and then he left.
Well, he's too busy spending his money.
Yes,
because
exactly.
I was looking, I'm looking at the pay for 2021, and this Rodney McMullen, I guess his name is $22.2 million, which what'd you put it at? 909 times that of the person who's actually doing the work and making the profit and helping that company be successful. He's doing one guy getting the pay of 909 people for basically sitting on his behind moving money from one pocket to the next.
Yeah, so to clarify, it's Joe Kelly who is at the bargaining table. He's the head of that division of the King Soopers supermarkets. But yes, the CEO of Kroger, who you mentioned, I mean, he got his pay bumped by millions of dollars right after the company ended hazard pay for workers. It only did hazard pay of $2 an hour for a month and a half, as if the virus had ended by May of 2020. It had not. And then just after they ended that, this guy gets even more money. And the responses, from workers in that survey are pretty damning. So they, it's not going unnoticed that this company has more inequality than even, some of the worst other companies in this country. We're very used to the idea that a CEO gets paid hundreds of times more than his average worker. But Kroger is bad even by those incredibly bad standards we already have, right? So one worker said, in their response to this survey, Rodney McMullen can afford helicopters and yachts, and I will be homeless when my parents die. Those are that one worker responded to the survey that they had not eaten in 3 days. These are workers who are surrounded by food. Yeah. They're providing food. They're making sure the public has food. And meanwhile, they can't afford to eat. And Kroger gives them, a minuscule discount that excludes produce, which is really a slap in the face. And so they're sharing food amongst each other. They're borrowing money from family. They're going to food banks and relying on SNAP benefits. So it's a really horrible situation. And it's important to note that Kroger, because it owns all these brands like King Soopers, it is in fact the largest grocery chain in the United States and the fourth largest private employer in the United States. So we're talking about 500,000 people working.
How come we never hear about this? I mean, this is the second largest retailer behind, food retailer behind Walmart, as you point out. Right. We always hear about Walmart. We always hear about the abuses there. How come Kroger seems to get a pass? Is it because a number of their workers are unionized and maybe that's not a focus? What do you think that is?
I think that might be part of it. It might also be the fact that it hides behind all these other brands, right? So people don't necessarily identify Ralph's with the same company as a Kroger. These are all owned by the same company, though. I think it's also true that sort of people do pick the biggest villain of the day and focus on that. But I really couldn't tell you why these workers aren't getting the amount of attention that I think they deserve. Their pay is not as bad as a fast food worker, right? The average Kroger employee makes something like $18 an hour. So in that sense, it might be that people think, well, that's not that bad a pay, right? It's above minimum wage. But when we look at the effects for 500,000 people of this kind of work, the fact that they're increasingly only letting them work part-time, right? Even though these employees want to work full-time, you can't make a living even if you make 18, if you're only getting, 20 hours a week. Yeah. And it's very unpredictable scheduling. It makes it hard to get a second job, not that you should have to. And so these things add up, right? And it's very good, I think, that this, report was done, which was an incredible feat in itself, getting 10,000 workers to respond. And, the workers in Texas almost went on strike similarly in the way Colorado's workers have today. So I think, more power. Every company like this deserves to have criticism put towards it. And so I'm glad that we're talking about this now.
Yeah, and the hope is while these workers are on strike, that nobody crosses their picket line. There are other stores, go there for the time being. put some pressure on this company to get to the table and negotiate in good faith. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Alex Press. Alex, a staff writer over at Jacobin Magazine. She got her most recent piece out on a survey done about the Kroger workers. It's titled "The Horrifying Report Shows the Miserable Working Conditions at Kroger." We'll get links out on social media on how you can take a look at that. I look at this and I look at some of these workers, and my grandmother was a UFCW worker for 20 some years back in the 60s, 70s, and into the early 80s, and they made a reasonable living. And my memory of that job, it was a small department store in Cleveland. In 1985, when it shut down, she was making something like $8.50 an hour with 6 weeks vacation, the best health care you could get, a defined benefit pension, all kinds of stuff that we now think, who gets that anymore? Those are days of the past. And when I went to the BLS calculator to take a look at what it would be right around the $22 an hour that they're talking about as a kind of a minimum for these workers. So it seems to me that they're not asking for anything that historically is out of line. They're just trying to rebuild what was the norm of past generations, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the case in so many of these workplace fights that go on. It's the fact that these companies are not going to give a penny more than they are required to give, right? Which is why the strikes are useful, that they're actually forcing them to make a change. But it's absolutely the case that these wages in real numbers have gone down for decades, and the benefits have been gutted, and the schedules have become more flexible, right? People are reporting that they're given a few hours notice before a shift change. These are people with kids, right? And so they have to find childcare. I mean, it's completely impossible now. These jobs in so many ways are worse. And I think, Kroger, we really can say, has a well-established pattern of resisting everything, right? So during the pandemic, certain local cities would pass ordinances called hazard pay ordinances, where they said every, quote unquote hero essential worker gets a very significant pay bump. I think in LA and Long Beach, it was something like $4 an hour during the pandemic. Kroger responded, it lobbied successfully with its industry peers to defeat these ordinances in some cities. And then in the ones where it was passed, they shut down stores entirely. Which is what, we call a capital strike. It's a boss saying, I would rather lose money and lose profits than admit that the public or that anyone other than myself has a say in how I'm running my business. And so Kroger, it's not surprising that they're resisting this so intransigently, and that they, it seemed to be not bargaining in good faith, right? This company is not going to give people even the very fair pay and benefits they're asking for.
It's crazy. And you look at the fact that, the money that they've earned, that these workers have earned for this company, wildly profitable. And you point out in 2020, the operating profits for Kroger was $4.05 billion with a B dollars. And you write that by the end of the third quarter 2021, Kroger had $2.28 billion in cash on hand, up from $399 million in early 2020. So not only did they do really well in 2020, they're doing better in 2021. So and moving forward, they're doing better. So they could share a little. So that whole argument of, in defense of the market, we can't really afford it. Nonsense. They're doing wildly well.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly when you see CEOs' pay going up by millions of dollars, and these stock buyback programs that they've been doing to reward shareholders with greater dividends, it's very insulting. They obviously have the money. The fact that they were so quick to end that hazard pay in less than 2 months, it's insulting, and it's very clear. The stakes are not confusing. They can't cry poverty. So much money that would have gone to restaurants instead went to Kroger during the pandemic. So yeah, this has been a blessing for the company's executives, the pandemic. It has been quite the opposite for everyone who is making their stores run.
Yeah, well, it's a boon for the CEO, the shareholders, the executives, but they're doing it off the backs of the workers and ultimately the consumers. And I'm hoping the folks in Denver will stay away until this is over. You never cross someone's picket line ever for any reason. There are other places. Go there during this time and send that message. But in looking at this, how much of this is the company's greed? How much of this is just the fact that our policies have harmed unions to the point to where there are very few union grocery stores. There's none in my area, so people don't even think about this anymore. Where do you put some of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think Kroger, like many other companies, has sort of gone on the offensive, especially during the pandemic. They're getting greedy is one way to put it. things are better than ever and they don't want to have any sort of give anything back. And so that does piss people off. But I asked that local president, Kim Cordova, today, because it's a tough question. Why are your union shops this bad? Why are union workers living in shelters? Her answer was, she pointed to the fact that the state doesn't have a functioning OSHA anymore, that labor laws have been so gutted that everything is stacked against them. The company has sort of intervened in union elections at Kroger. And so there are many real reasons that aren't just the union's fault, right? And I think it really is the case that just capital has gone on the offensive. But on the flip side, workers have been pushed to the brink. And so that's, yet again, why we're seeing a strike, just as we've been seeing for the past year. Workers who otherwise might have accepted something have said, I have nothing left to lose.
No.
And so
especially in this moment of the Great Resignation, because I'll tell you, I'm surprised they're able to even keep people. Given the stories that we've heard, some 4.5 million people quitting jobs, the fact that these workers have a union, that's the reason they're on strike and they're taking this position. And good on them. I wish them the best. Last question I've got for you: how do we help? How do people help these folks? Is there a strike fund set up yet? Will that come? What are you seeing?
Yeah, there is a strike fund. I'm happy to send it to you so that you can post it for people. The union is also explicitly telling people not to shop at the stores they're on strike, which is I think 78 or 80 stores is across Colorado, and to otherwise support the workers, right? Every worker's glad if you join them on a picket line, but also that strike fund as well. So those are the things they're asking for. And they're asking, of course, as ever, that workers who have their own unions or have their own workplace power keep building that, because every union having a win helps the rest of us, right? And so I think seeing yourself as part of this struggle, these are the places we go to get food, right? These are parts of our community.
Yeah, good. I wish them the best. And if you get me those links, we'll make sure we get them out. Alex,
Sure.
As always, fantastic work. Looking forward to have you back again real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good night, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Alex Press. Make sure you check out her work over at Jacobin Magazine. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Fellow Americans, 1 year ago today, democracy was attacked. Those who stormed this Capitol and those who called on them to do so held a dagger at the throat of America. They want to rule, or they will ruin. Ruin what our country fought for at Lexington and Concord, at Gettysburg and Omaha Beach, Seneca Falls, Selma, Alabama. The right to vote, the right to govern ourselves, the right to determine our own destiny. You can't love your country only when you win. This is not a land of kings or dictators or autocrats, so we have to be firm, resolute, and unyielding in our defense of the right to vote and to have that vote counted. I will stand in this breach. I will defend this nation, because we have a shared belief in democracy. Anything is possible. Anything. God bless you all, and God bless those who stand watch over our democracy.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, a couple weeks ago, I spent a little time in my community hospital. Was there with a relative, and they had split the emergency room in half. Half over here were people who were, obviously in distress, people with broken arms, people with things that you could see. And on the other side of the room, the invisible divide, were all the people who I found out later all tested positive for COVID, all waiting for a room because the hospital was just blown away. In fact, the ER was full of people sitting in chairs in the hallways waiting to be seen in one way or another. And we were there like 8.5 hours for something that should not have taken that long. There were people there for 20 hours. It was ridiculous. And I remember coming out of there going, what is going on with our hospital system? And you find out, look, COVID is taking over. And then the surge happened. And I can't imagine how bad things are now, especially in small town America, which made me think back to a guy we had on talking about a book that was fantastic. And this was before things were bad. So it made me go, hey, I got to reach back out to Brian Alexander, the author of The Hospital, Life, Death, and Dollars in a Small American Town, and talk about how bad is it now. Brian, thanks for taking time for us.
It's a pleasure. It's always good to see you, Rick.
So, I got to tell you, I was thinking about you in the book as I'm sitting in this. I live in a fairly small rural community, and the hospital just slammed. There's nowhere to move. There's nowhere to put people, and I'm going. I can't imagine how people are doing in places that don't have the resources that we do, because we've got a pretty good system here. And I can't imagine how it is in most places in real rural America, given the fact that 1 million people a day, 1.3 million the other day, are getting sick, and the number of hospitalizations are just through the roof. So I guess the beginning question is, how bad is it in rural America right now in the hospital system?
It's bad. It is crisis proportions, and it's bad all over. It's also bad in urban centers. I don't want to say it's only bad in rural communities. I was recently in New York, and they had a crisis mainly because staff people were testing positive, and so they didn't have the staff. In rural America, it's the low vaccination rates. It is some staff have left. Staff themselves, as in the urban centers, are coming down with it. And in the hospital that I wrote about in Bryan, Ohio, in rural Williams County, in the far northwest corner of the state, they consider themselves in a crisis situation. People are dying there almost every day, and new cases are showing up almost every day. And most alarmingly, they haven't even reached their peak yet. So this is, and people who need care for other reasons, like God forbid you hit a deer and you need to go to the hospital in Bryan, Ohio, they may not be able to take you. There was a moment about 2 weeks ago when they were doing what was called EMS bypass. In other words, if you weren't literally having a heart attack and dying, they took you as far away as they could get. Wow. Because they couldn't handle you.
And I've been asking that question for a while now. How many people are dying, not from COVID, but from things that could have been treated, could have been helped, but there was no room. We've got all these people in the ICU who are on ventilators, and you got all this, the whole system just packed, and people are waiting. We see an occasional story, but I gotta imagine it's much worse than an occasional story.
Oh yeah, and a lot of these cases and even deaths aren't even necessarily being fully recorded. That's partly because in smaller communities, there may not be a full-time coroner. And if there is a part-time coroner, he may not have the time or the financial wherewithal because of his budget to do a full-on testing procedure on a dead body. So they may say, died of, pneumonia. That may have really been a COVID situation.
Or just the natural causes. They were old, they died. It just was what it was when it could have been. And I've been arguing that as well, that, we're closing in on 800,000 something now. And you go, I got to think it's much worse than that, especially you look at states like Florida that ideologically seem opposed to the idea of reporting. So I got to imagine that it's even worse than what we're being told.
It is. As a public health official in a county in Ohio told me just the other day, he said, all is lost. And when you are a public health official who has been attacked for over 2 years now because you want to do masks, you want to encourage people to get vaccinated, and they've stuck it out and they've stuck it out, and now they are saying all is lost. That's a bad, bad situation.
No, it's horrible. And this is, I go back to the very beginning. And my position from the very start was we've got to do all of these things so that we save our healthcare system from collapse. We don't want to blow it out and have what I saw recently in ours, where it's just packed with people and nowhere to go. And then you end up flying, in other directions to try and hopefully find some place for someone. For me, that was always it. And then you don't want to burn these people out. At some point, you need them. And, the horror stories that I hear, doctors being assaulted, nurses being assaulted, the kind of, it's the kind of craziness over the vaccine and over, it's a hoax, and give them the horse dewormer and, bring out the Clorox, and now the guy drinking urine. Gee, I mean, I can't imagine what these people go through on a daily basis, nor would I want to do it.
Yeah, they feel really unappreciated, Rick. And most of them are just burnt out, the ones that are even still there. because they deal with this all the time. And sometimes they have their own political leadership. In Williams County, a county commissioner sat in front of the public health official and the head of the hospital and demanded to know why they weren't using ivermectin on the patients. I mean, and they tried to explain, look, it doesn't work, but he wasn't going to have any of that explanation. And so to them, it's just like beating their heads against the wall.
No, I'm waiting. You know, I don't know if you saw the story, and I've been making a joke out of it the last couple of days because I don't know what else you do with someone saying that the cure for COVID is drinking urine. I don't know where you go with it. If that is now the cure, I don't know what I don't know how you move on from there.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a nephrologist, a kidney doctor on Twitter today saying, please don't drink your urine.
No. See, this is where I'm going to differ from the nephrologist and probably from most people. I've gotten to the point to where we've kept the dim too long. If you're someone who's really going to take a cup of urine and you're really, good for you. Work on that. If you're going to go to the Tractor Supply and grab a handful of the horse dewormer, because if some's good, a lot's better. Knock yourself out. I'm tired of it at this point. I think most Americans are tired of stupid dragging us down because this is part of why things have gotten so bad.
Well, Rick, I empathize with you, and I have to say my own patience really gets worn thin. But I spent a couple of years basically living in Williams County, and I grew up in a small town in Ohio, another small town, Lancaster, Ohio, and I got to say, a lot of these people are victims themselves. They're victims of misinformation. They're victims of lies. They're victims of propaganda. And they are paying for it in some cases with their lives. And so while I am very tempted to say, hey, one less person I got to deal with, I really fight that because I regard a lot of these people as victims also.
I was there for a very long time. And I look, I want to help people. And I know it's bad for my soul. It's bad for my karma. But at some point, when you keep hearing that what's out there, you keep hearing the evidence, you keep hearing, doctors coming on saying, don't drink the urine, and someone's still going to do it. Don't drink the bleach, and someone still does it. How do you then help them?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have my buddy Keith Swihart that I wrote about in the book, The Hospital, diabetic. He's now virtually blind due to his diabetes. He's still a young man. He's only 41 years old. And I call him about every week and I say, how you doing, Keith? And he goes, I'm doing good. And I say, have you been vaccinated yet? And he said, no, I'm still thinking about it. And I say, Keith, you know what I'm going to tell you? He said, I know, but I have people on Facebook. I have people, they're telling me this. And there are a couple of doctors in that community, by the way, that are real Trump acolytes who are giving some bad information too. And so he feels torn between people like me telling him to go get vaccinated and people in his life who are saying, hey, I read this, I saw that. There's so much of it out there. It's really tough on a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And I'm hopeful at some point that we all wake up to this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Brian Alexander. Brian's the author of The Hospital, Life, Death, and Dollars in a Small American Town. You can get this at the St. Martin's Press book. We'll get it out on social media, how you can take a look at it. One of the things that I've been saying, Brian, is, we need to build more facilities. What's happened over the years is we've consolidated so many of these hospital systems down, and places like rural communities have been screwed. Emergency rooms have been closed because, falling insurance rates, a whole bunch of stuff. We haven't invested in it. Is there a way forward to maybe when the next pandemic hits, we can be a little bit more prepared? Are there any prescriptions for the future? What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, the big prescription, ultimately, we need a national health plan. Before that, however, we really need to give the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, more power to go after these concentrated health systems. Because you're right, Rick, a lot of these independent community hospitals are really suffering. They're barely making a margin or they are losing money. Meanwhile, the big health systems are making money hand over fist, and they're not investing in some of the very basic stuff. Just the other day in Toledo, Ohio, ProMedica, a big health system, they announced that they're going to be the title sponsor for the USGA U.S. Women's Open. Going to be the richest purse, and ProMedica Health Systems is going to spend millions of dollars to do that. Why is a health system supposed to be a nonprofit? Why are they sponsoring the richest women's golf tournament in the world? That doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any sense. And how do you justify that?
Well, you don't. To me, you don't justify it. But the way you say is, well, we're a nonprofit, and so we are going to get some charity dollars out of that. But what they're really doing is forking over a lot of money for brand recognition that they then use in their for-profit arms. A lot of these nonprofit health systems actually have for-profit businesses.
Yeah.
So the idea of the quote-unquote nonprofit health system is really become a myth in our country.
At what point do we pull that nonprofit status?
Well, that's my feeling. I mean, I've had people object to the way I feel about this and say, look, every business does this. And I say, fine, then tax them like a business. If that's what you're going to do, then they ought to pay taxes like all other businesses do.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy. And ultimately, I look at healthcare as something that shouldn't be a profit motive thing anyway. It should be a part of the commons, part of the public good, which is why I do believe in community hospitals. I don't believe in privatization of our healthcare system, which is why we, the taxpayers, should be taking these things on, because it's something we need, like police and fire. We should have these things as part of our commons so that when we need them, they're there. And when we do need them, we don't go broke using them.
Yeah, Jonas Salk did not try to patent the polio vaccine. The Canadian scientists and doctors who isolated insulin sold the rights to it for $1 because they felt that it would be immoral to profit from it. Now insulin can bankrupt a diabetic in our country.
Yeah, well, that's when there was something called morality back then. This concept, when you're talking about money, there's no such thing as moral or immoral. It's about hooray for me and the heck with everyone else. Do you see any movement to get us in that direction, though? I mean, this pandemic should be, a flashing red light to a lot of us on a lot of issues: our manufacturing, supply chains, our production, but also our healthcare system, which, we should be able to get tested as often as possible. These tests should be free and available. We shouldn't be getting gouged by drugstores and Walmart. There's a lot that we should be reclaiming as taxpayers and citizens.
We should be. In fact, I argue in the book, The Hospital, that really what the pandemic did was reveal these big fault lines that we have been papering over for the last 50 years or so. It really revealed them and opened wider chasms in a number of areas: income inequality, what life is like for a meatpacking house worker. These all affect American health. And I think that it's revealed the fragility of our healthcare system and the fact that we have not invested in public health the way that we should have.
Yeah, and for me, it all comes back to the politics. It all comes back to how broken our political system is. Because in any functional democracy, Brian, we would have leaders who are trying to address these issues.
Well, there is some good movement, which is what you asked about. I mean, for example, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, has announced an initiative to basically create nonprofit insulin by having the state go into the insulin business. I've argued for years that the federal government ought to do that for generic drugs. The federal government ought to be making generic drugs and sell them at cost. For whatever it costs to make it, sell that so there's no profit motive off of off-patent drugs, which is really what most drugs are off-patent drugs.
Especially when you look at the fact that our tax dollars go into developing most drugs in this country through the NIH or through the university system that we fund. So at some level, we're paying for it no matter what.
Yeah, well, look what's happening with the dispute over intellectual property for the Moderna vaccine. I mean, Moderna is trying to claim that the federal scientists who worked on the vaccine and helped develop it don't get any credit on that, and they want the intellectual property all for themselves.
What happened to Jonas Salk?
Yeah. Well, Jonas Salk got rich in other ways, but he didn't really get rich off of the vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to that. You think about how screwed up our society is. Because look, we should be giving that stuff away to the third world, where all of this stuff is now mutating, and who knows what's coming next because of it. There should be in countries that want the vaccines, and they are there. The people who don't want it here, we should be giving it to them.
And think about what happened last December, a year ago December, when the vaccines finally came out. Everybody, not everybody, unfortunately, but a lot of people, millions of us, stood in line. We sat in our cars on long lines to get this vaccine.
Yep.
Didn't cost us a dime individually. We all paid for it through our taxes, of course.
Yeah.
But that was socialized medicine, and America really embraced socialized medicine.
And it worked. Brian, I appreciate the time. Great stuff as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Brian Alexander, author of The Hospital. Make sure you get his book. We'll get links out on social media. Life, Death, and Dollars in a Small American Town. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.